Even though V had only been gone for an hour, it was still a strange feeling to be alone. It shouldn't have been. I'd secluded myself for much of my life. But to be left with nothing except my own thoughts to keep me company, it suddenly felt like I had been locked in a room with a stranger. I was surprised she had left. It wasn't like anyone would dare to fuck with my things I'd left back at Lizzie's. She had hesitated before going out the door, and I had needed to reassure her that I wasn't going to do what Evelyn had done. At first, I tried to keep myself busy, deciding to fix the settings on my wreath, but that had been all too easy to do, and after a few short minutes, a deafening silence rang in my ears. Noise. I needed noise. The rooftop of our apartment wasn't intended to be a living space, but in a city where everyone had been squashed together like sardines, my abuela had loved the few times she could get her hands on those. There was always a need for more space. No one owned it, of course, and I'd never learned who had dragged the table and chairs up there. It was a communal place where anyone could go to cool their head off or enjoy a smoke. I'd spent more than my fair share of hours up there over the years staring at the city, wondering if any of its promises had ever come true. The chaos of rush hour traffic created a steady roar that was oddly soothing to listen to. I would have been somewhere on those streets myself, trudging toward Lizzie's to start my shift. But Susie had seen to it those days were over. With nothing else to do, I patiently waited for V's return. But I couldn't focus. My attention kept being drawn back to the picture in my hands. A young girl, completely oblivious to the life ahead of her, smiled back at me. Who was she? V had tossed it in the spare room when we'd gotten back from our last trip to Laguna Bend. I don't know why I grabbed it on the way upstairs, and I still wasn't sure what to do with it. Hanging it up seemed wrong. I wasn't that girl, hadn't been in ages, but even though it had been left behind by my abuelos and I had completely forgotten about it, throwing it away didn't seem like the right thing to do either. I heard the familiar growl of a motorcycle approaching. There she was, wearing that black leather jacket of hers, pink hair flowing in the wind. My van trailed not far behind, engine rattling, though it was strange to see someone else behind the wheel. Hopefully Rita hadn't pushed the engine too hard, as I couldn't afford for anything else to go wrong. V waved to me as she passed by. It was good to see a genuine smile on her face again. She'd spent most of the day still fuming about handing things over to River, but she had accepted it, even if she didn't like it. Heaving a sigh, I stood and made my way back downstairs. V and Rita were already inside, stacking boxes on the floor of the kitchen when I walked in. "What's all this?" I asked. Rita turned and smiled. "This," she said, presenting the mess they'd made, "is your office. Grabbed everything we could of yours from the den. Might have even slipped in a thing or two that wasn't yours. Like this?" V held up the half-empty bottle of vodka I'd stashed away on my desk and cast a questioning glance at me. Another secret out of the bag. "Yeah, like that," I confessed. "Shit. Thanks for bringing all of this stuff back. How'd you get Susie on board with letting go of it all?" "On board?" Rita laughed. "Judy, have you met her before? Bitch was hollering and raising all kinds of hell while we were packing everything up, but she didn't stop us either. She knows that she's on thin ice with the Mox after that fucking display V put on last night." I crossed my arms, making sure to tuck my wrists securely in the crooks of my elbows. "Thin ice? What do you mean? Everyone's kicking up their dues and she's got the run of things. Why would she be in any trouble?" Rita glanced at V, and a silent understanding passed between them. V retreated into the bathroom, leaving the two of us alone. Had she told Rita about the XBD? About what I'd done to myself? No, she wouldn't have. "Since you're still a Mox, I'll let you in on things. though the same rules still apply. V only knows about it because she walked in when we were meeting. Well, this was interesting. Rita had even lowered her voice as if someone might be camping right outside the front door trying to listen in. Susie's been running shit for a long time, and some of us are starting to think it's been too long. The mocks aren't looked at seriously anymore. More like we're just a glamorized BD studio, and with you gone, even that's not gonna hold up anymore. And with Lizzie's on the verge of going under— Wait, I held up my hand. Going under? How the fuck is that possible? The place might not be as packed as it once was, but there's always someone throwing back a glass at the bar. Can't be that bad. But the troubled look on Rita's face told me it was. If it was just the bar and the BD biz on the side, then yeah, the place would be alright. But it ain't just that. Susie got herself in over her head and put the lease up as collateral. My jaw nearly dropped to the floor. What? Rita glanced at the bathroom door. V was running the sink, allowing us the privacy we needed. Still, her voice was barely above a whisper. I don't know what your deal with her was when you started that studio of yours a while back, but she decided at some point not to wait around for the eddies to roll in. Started taking loans out all over town from anyone who had their hand out. Guess maybe she thought she could cover them once things took off. Fuck, are you saying it's my fault the bar's going down? No, Judy, you gonk. She's the one who took out the loans. She's the one waving the lease around like a blank check. Despite Rita's assurances, I couldn't help but feel responsible for what was happening. Susie was many things, and being frugal with every eddy that crossed her way was near the top of the list. She wouldn't have taken out any loans unless she'd been certain she could pay them off. And who else but me would have given her that certainty? How'd you hear about this? Susie keeps her biz pretty close to her tits. Not in this case, Rita sighed, shaking her head. Word's out on the street that she's desperate and hitting up anyone who's willing to extend their hand. And since the bar's in claw territory, that ain't good for us. Shit. It wasn't good at all. Even though Lizzie's was owned and run by the mocks, the claws still had the run of the surrounding streets. There was an uneasy truce of sorts between the two gangs, but what better way for the claws to take the joint over than to simply cut a deal with Susie? And if that happened, then the mocks could kiss their reputation goodbye. Rita must have read my mind. We can't keep going on under Susie's leadership. If we try to wait things out, sooner or later we're all going to find ourselves working at Clouds just to make an eddy. So, a few of us met up earlier and we talked things over. What are you going to do? You're not thinking of— No, we can't do that. As much as I'd love to crack that plastic jaw of hers just to shut her the hell up, we can't go starting some kind of uprising. Susie's a real piece of work, but she's still got some who are loyal to her. And the claws will smell the first drop of Mock's blood we spill and be all over us. My brow narrowed. I was trying to understand what her plan was, but I wasn't able to see it. So, if you're not getting rid of Susie, then— A loud bang rattled the walls as Rita slammed her fist against the counter. Thank fuck she didn't use all of her strength, or she would have cracked the surface. Then I don't know what the fuck we're gonna do. We're all disorganized, spitballing gonk ideas. Rita stopped. V had turned off the sink. You two almost finished? V called out. How much longer do I gotta wait in here? Just a few more. You can come out, V, I interrupted, casting a sharp glare at Rita. We're done. The door slid open and V stepped out, her hands as dry as they'd been when she'd walked in. Her eyes darted between the two of us, sensing the tension. What's going on? V, I've decided I'm going to help Rita and the other mocks come up with a plan to overthrow Susie so we can save Lizzie's from falling into the hands of the claws. And while I'm at it, I'm thinking I'll also take over as their leader. Think about it. I could expand the bar, hire a couple BD techs to work out of the basement. Shit, if things go well, then in a year or two, we might even be able to expand and open a second location someplace. It's gonna be preem. I chuckled at how creative I could be sometimes. And the craziest part was, if I'd managed to keep V in the dark, I might very well have spoken those words. But I hadn't. Maybe I was afraid of failing once again, just like I had all throughout my life. Or maybe something had finally clicked inside my brain and was telling me it was a bad idea. Either way, I couldn't be a part of this. Nothing, I finally said. Mocs are just going through some struggles. I'm sure they'll figure out what to do. Without me. Rita's lips parted. Judy, I thought you might want to... You were wrong, Rita. Yeah, I'm still a Mox. And sure, I'd love to keep the place out of the hands of the claws. Be good to have my job back as well, and not have Susie breathing down my neck. But at some point, I can't keep living a fairy tale. I unfolded my arms and rested my hands on my hip, watching as Rita's eyes wandered toward the wrapping around my wrist and widened. Judy, did you? Yeah, I did. With the same shaver I use on my legs. So that tells you where my head's at. Wait, Rita, don't cry. But it was too late. Her face had already scrunched up and tears were starting to form. I glanced uncertainly at V. She was just as surprised as I was. It struck me I was standing between the only two people I had confided in. Rita, who appeared to be on the verge of collapse, and V, who had never appeared stronger. I tried to hug Rita, but she held out her hand, stopping me. From the looks of things, she was trying to pull herself together. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have brought this up. Got carried away at the meeting and thought after last night that you might want to help. I didn't know. It's all right, V chimed in. There's no way you could have known. We ain't exactly broadcasting it. Rita wiped out her eyes, which were still being drawn to my wrist like a magnet. Listen, I don't mean to bring this up, but we were talking. Do you want us to find these fuckers? The ones who did this to you? The Mox would go for that? V quickly asked. What about Susie? Fuck her, Rita snarled. She's nothing but a Mox in name only. Those of us who are real Mox look after each other, and Judy's no exception. I was starting to feel uneasy with where this was headed. The desire for revenge I easily understood. Hell, a part of me wanted nothing more than to see those fuckers suffer horribly for hours, days even. Cutting off their balls would be a start before I put an iron in each of their mouths and had them beg before pulling the trigger. But wasn't that supposed to be my call? Wasn't I supposed to be the one itching to do something? I snapped out of my thoughts when I realized they were both looking at me, waiting for my verdict. How about it, Judy? Rita asked. Want us to crack some skulls for you? Just say the word. I shook my head, already anticipating V's response. Judy, it's my call, ain't it? I said no, so let it be. I hadn't meant to raise my voice, but it seemed like the only way I could get through to them. I wasn't just some observer listening in to what others would decide for me. This was my life, my decision. The silence which followed told me I'd managed to get my point across. All right, Rita said finally. But if you change your mind, we got your back. Once a Mox, always a Mox, right? Right. Another awkward silence. Rita glanced at her hollow. Shit, I've got to get back to Lizzie's or I'm going to be late for my shift. She turned her attention to me. Are you okay? No, I said before casting a quick glance at V. But at least I can be honest with myself about that now. And I'm in good hands, so who knows? Maybe I will be. Even as V smiled, I saw something flicker behind Rita's eyes. I realized I had just dashed her last hopes for a different flavor of the cotton candy couple, as she'd put it. I felt bad for her, but not the least bit guilty. Okay, Rita whispered and started toward the door. Thanks for your help, V said as she walked past. I really appreciate it. You got it. Rita stopped at the door and looked back at us. Her eyes settled on V. Take care of her. Yeah, of course I will. Rita said nothing further as she turned and walked out the door. V turned toward me. There wasn't a need to say anything further. We both knew. I took her hand into my own. Come on, help me unpack all of this. I had hoped it would only take a few minutes to sort through everything, that I could quickly find the things I wanted to keep out and leave the rest in the boxes. Shit, was I wrong. I had forgotten how much I had dragged down into my den over the years. Servers, monitors, the editing suite I'd modded piece by piece over the years, my glove and extra wreaths, back issues of BD Quarterly, amps, old photos. I'd sunk an entire fortune into it all. My home away from home. Our storage room would be bursting at the seams by the time we got everything in there. But rather than being stressful, it turned out to be an absolute blast. Every piece of hardware was a memory. I knew V was humoring me as I droned on endlessly, complaining about a missing feature or gushing over how well I'd pieced together a sensor package that worked with my editing software. Tech talk bored the shit out of her, and for good reason. Most of her problems were handled with a gun. But still, it felt great to finally talk about something normal, something simple, free of lies and pain. And V was being a good sport about it, even if she had taken to rolling her eyes every time I opened my mouth. "You're just being a brat now," V complained. "You know damn well I don't know what matrices means. It's not hard, V. Just code and algorithms and folder structures to hold all the data is all. Most of the factory presets are built to support whatever brand of hardware they are, but the second you throw something new into the mix, it all gets fucked. Swapping those out is critical to keeping performance tip-top." I bit my lip, struggling to hide the smile tugging at my lips. There was a clear line between teasing and being an ass, and I was certainly tempting fate, but damn it, I'd earned myself a little respite after the day I'd had. "Brat," V spat back at me before digging into the box next to her. We were sitting on the floor in the living room, having carved out a small oasis for ourselves amidst all my crap. It felt strange looking out the window every so often and seeing the sun set behind the city, almost as strange as what was happening right in front of me. This wasn't a date or a special occasion where we were trying to knit together the bond that had frayed between us. V had tried that on the night we dined at Blue, and I'd made my own desperate attempt when I dragged her out to Laguna Bend. Both times, our hearts had been in the right place, but we'd failed to connect. This was different. It was just us, talking and laughing. The hell is this? I glanced up to see V pulling an antiquated keyboard out of the box. Several of the keys had popped out and the shard terminal had splintered off at some point. A faded sticker on the back had peeled away from one of the corners, obscuring the words that had been printed upon it. Not that I couldn't remember what it said. That was Sam's, or rather, it used to belong to Susie, and she was just letting Sam use it. That's what the sticker on the back used to say. Property of Susie Q. Sam, V pursed her lips. I think I remember you mentioning her. She was the one you used to work with, right? Always smiling? That's the one. V flipped the keyboard over and looked at the sticker. You know, a part of me had hoped Susie hadn't always had such a giant stick jammed up her ass. Who knew she was born that way? I laughed. Yep. Always had her eyes on what everyone brought to the bottom line. Looks like I was no exception to that. I'm sorry, V said, tossing the keyboard aside. I know you hated it there, but still, you were the best thing that place had going for it. Sounds like they're pretty fucked unless they think of something. V was right. They probably were. But while I should have cared about their plight, especially as a Mox, I simply couldn't. It was exhausting to think about, and my reserves were already depleted. I stood up and walked into the kitchen, brushing aside some of the clutter so I could grab a glass from near the sink. As I filled it with water, my eyes settled on the bottle of vodka resting on the counter. I knew V had intended to empty it and had simply forgotten to do so. It was right there, calling out to me. She would never know. The counter was in the way, so she wouldn't see me, and I already had a glass in my hand. I turned off the water and set the glass down. My face remained calm, even as a vicious battle raged inside of my mind.
Grab it. Throw one back and take the edge off. You know it'll help. Don't you dare. One drink won't fucking kill you, and you haven't had one in weeks, but one is all it'll take and you fucking know it. Bullshit. You know better than that. You can trust yourself to have just one.
I reached out for the bottle but stopped when I saw the bandage around my wrist. Standing there, my arm frozen in midair, it all came rushing back. I knew what awaited me at the bottom of the glass I was about to pour for myself. I'd been down that road so many times before, and it always led to a dead end. With a growl, I swiped the bottle off the counter and threw it into the sink as hard as I could. Instead of shattering like I hoped it would, it smacked against the stainless steel surface with a loud bang, rattling back and forth before finally settling still. I grabbed onto the ledge, heaving for breath as V bolted upright to see what had happened. There was a faint ringing in my ears over the deafening silence the apartment had suddenly been plunged into.
Ask.
V? Yeah, Jude? My voice caught in my throat. Even now, having finally accepted the inevitable, my fucked up brain still insisted on drawing every last ounce of pain out of me that it could.
Just ask.
I craned my neck, forcing myself to look at V. I want to change what I am, but I'm so fucking tired. I'm tired of being this person. Tired of Lizzie's and gigs and Night City and worrying about Eddie's all the damn time. Tired of being a liar and a fucking manipulator. Most of all, though, I'm tired of looking in the mirror and not knowing who's looking back at me. I want to change, start everything over, but I... The words were right there, and even though my chin trembled in revolt of what I was about to say, I knew that after 18 years, the time had finally arrived. My only regret was not having asked sooner. I choked back a sob. I need help. Will you help me? Please, Judy. V's arms were around me before I knew it, pulling me into a tight embrace. Tears spilled down my cheeks as I cried into her shoulder, but it wasn't the same as it had been the night before. That had been anger, fear, and, most of all, shame. The shame of what I was and what I had done to myself. But what I felt now was something I hadn't experienced since the day I finally walked out on Cindy. Pride. I don't know where to start, I whispered. Baby. V pulled away and brought her face close to my own so she could look me in the eye. You've already come so far. I'm so proud of you for finally asking for help. The right way, Judy. We'll figure all of this out together. It's gonna take time, but you don't gotta do this by yourself. I'm right here with you, every step of the fucking way. I love you. I tried to tell V that I loved her, but my throat was so tight nothing would come out. So instead, I ignored the sting in my wrist and pulled her into a kiss. It had been so long since we had truly kissed. I knew she was scared to touch me, fearful that in my current state she might trigger something neither of us could expect. But I needed this. Needed her to know that even though it was still buried somewhere in my subconscious and I wasn't fully aware of it yet, that I truly trusted her. She was proud of me, and for the first time in so long, I was too.